Okay, we're recording. Yeah, welcome guys. I believe this is our sixth meeting of the GDC, and I know that a lot of you guys may have been new. There are some new members here as well. Probably a lot of people join every day in the GDC. But really, thank you very much for joining this meeting. I really love your determination in learning more about game development. Really feels appreciated. Um, so before we begin today, I would like to discuss about some stuff like some announcements, and then we're going to talk about the agendas again to those who just haven't joined the meeting. Right. First of all, let's talk about some announcements as I promised. First of all, congrats to IQ. I know you're in the call. Congrats to you, bro. You won Discord Nitro. Um, Technically, Oli was supposed to win, but you did not respond within the 15 minutes of time. You didn't click on the Discord gifts, so I assume that it was too late by then. So then I clicked on that random name picker again, and turns out IQ won. So I'm really sorry, Oli, but really next time you could perhaps check your messages more often, maybe. But um, yeah, but congrats to IQ. You really did it, and it's really cool. But yes, guys, I also posted a new poll in let me just share my screen. So if you guys can see my screen here, I added a poll in the Unity chat. So at your own time, anytime you would like, please be sure to fill out that poll. It'll be really nice of you. Because I want to see if you guys are still interested in these kind of prize events. You know, like this time the prize was Discord Nitro, right? But maybe in the next event I could be giving out some other cool prizes, right? Could be like other types of prizes, maybe like a game, a very expensive video game, or perhaps like YouTube Premium, which I know a lot of you guys don't have, and I don't think anybody would care for having it. Neither would I. I wouldn't really care about it, but I would just keep on doing something about this because it also seems like it's very fun and competition and stuff. And the more we compete, it keeps the server active. So it's kind of helping. It's like a win-win situation here. Like one, it's helping the GDC keep itself active so that more people can join rather than leaving. And second, it's just more fun for you all, right? You can learn more about each other, learn to communicate with each other, get more active, and at the same time, while you're getting active, because that's really essentially the way to be in that leaderboard. Um, the real way to do this is just by learning more game development, right? And at the same time, you will still learn a lot of game development techniques. So in a way, hypothetically, it's more of a win-win situation, and I really, really like that. So in your own time, if you have some time, just be sure. I think a person already have reacted to this already, but thank you. But if you haven't, just make sure you do. I'll also post in the announcements channel later today. Let me. That's the wrong one. Okay. All right. And then speaking of that, I also made some modifications in Unity for the past couple of days. I was catching up with some work, right? So let me just share my screen there as well. All right, so you can see over here that I've done a lot. Okay, I've done a lot with lighting. Don't worry. Speaking of lighting, we're gonna talk about that in the next lecture. So don't worry about that today. But it is a really interesting concept, and it's also something that essentially brings something in your game, some type of vibe and some vision, some type of feeling when you're playing the game. It really goes along with the idea of what you're trying to intend to create, and it really helps you make that execution happen. What you really tried to intend to make, right? But just ignore about that because you can see over here that there's so many lightings. There's like point light, directional light. There's also like spotlight, but you don't need to know these words right now. We'll be talking about that in the next lecture. But what I really want you guys to know is that I made 3 different scenes, as I said, all these different folders, all these different files that has a Unity logo. That we call them scenes. And this is level 1. You can see this is level 1. Then I think I also made level 2. It looks a bit more complex. I don't know why, but it also gives me like a Spider-Man kind of vibe. And then for level 3, as you can see, I added some stuff over here. It looks very, very different. But what I wanted to tell you is the way I made all these different things, right? It's all these simple tools from these 3D objects. It's basically all these simple things. I've seen that a lot of you have put a lot of time and effort into it, and I really like it. But try to keep on using other types of stuff as well, right? This sphere, this capsule, this cylinder, this plane, this quad. You probably might not need ragdoll, terrain, tree, Windzone, 3D text. You don't need those yet, especially also Text Mesh Pro. Um, so mostly the thing that you might be using to make your game is all these shapes above. Also to let you know, your shape should also go along with your theme. Okay, so anything that's futuristic is mostly polygonal, right? So we would be most likely using something like a cube or maybe not a cylinder, depending on what scenario it is in your level. But usually we'll be using a cube, or you'll be using a plane or a quad, anything that's polygonal, that is kind of, it has corners. But if it was like another type of game, right, it had another vibe in it, then you might use round. You might focus on roundness than on polygonal ideas. So then you would be using things like sphere, capsule, cylinder, all that kind of stuff. So really, the thing that you're intending to create also plays a key role into what type of shapes you're trying to add in your game. For me, I was trying to make like a futuristic retro type of game, and I feel like, this kind of did a great job making more polygonal shapes and playing around. And the cool part is all these things that you see over here, they aren't different types of shapes. They're all basically cube. It's just that I used the scale tool. So if you remember, if I use Core T, I believe the R, if you press R on your keyboard, as I said in the previous meetings, that is your scale tool. And I basically modified this entire cube object using the scale tool, and I made it a long rectangular prism. And what I want you guys to know is you could also make your games, by modifying just small little things, and it just makes it look amazing, right? So today's kind of trend is more on simplicity as game developers. And that's what I also want you to try to know. Like, a lot of people love to play simple games, but at the same time, it should be very fun and complex, right? So it's kind of this two contrasting ideas that game developers need to try to find a way, which is a very challenging thing. Right? So what I basically did is I added obstacles, right? And the way I kind of grouped them, right? Because in Unity, you cannot like, hey, like I click on these things and then I right click, and there shouldn't be an option called group. Like if I clearly do that right now, um, oops, let me click on this. There's no option for grouping, right? So what I did was I right click and I created an empty object. And what I did is I just I just clicked it once and named the object. I'm just gonna not name anything because I was giving an example. And then what I did is I just dragged these objects and dragged it, like, if this was not part of the obstacle, let's just say it wasn't, I would just be dragging it, and I shouldn't be seeing this blue line, okay? If it's blue line, that means it's not gonna go inside of that game object, that empty object called game object. It's just gonna go below, right? Like if I do that, it's not anywhere, so I'm just gonna control. Yep, I think that's what I did. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So if I did that, if it's blue, it's just out of that thing and it's not anywhere. It's like just its own, right? But I want to put them together. And usually you need to see that kind of gray looking thing on top. And that kind of is like a signal that, okay, now it's going to go through that. And now you can see it became a group. But I'm not going to do that because I already made one. So I'm just going to delete this. But this is like an type of idea. This is a way to organize your game, essentially. And you can see that instead of like having this all around, I could have saved a lot of space in my environment on the left side of the hierarchy. And I could easily notice that, oh, okay, this is the obstacles. So if I just click this once, I selected all of the obstacles in the place. And then there's lighting, so that I select all the lightings in this place. And then there's the ground, so I just selected the ground, which again, if anything's blue, remember, that's a prefab, as I explained in the previous lessons. And then, there's a character prefab. So if I go back to assets, also speaking of assets and all that stuff, I kind of organize, and that's just something that I want you to emphasize on. Try to organize your environment as much as possible, because if you were possibly going to work in a game development company, one thing that they do assess you on is essentially organizational skills. Okay, I mean, they don't really like, it's not a requirement, but it's always good to impress your bosses, right? So it's not just about impressing your boss. It also helps you. It also keeps your place tidy and clean, and it's just easy to access everything. It's very user friendly as well. So I really recommend doing this. If you don't know how to create a folder, just right click and create, and you can see an option on the top, literally on the top, and we call it folder. Then you can just literally drag the stuff through there, and you have essentially organized it. This is something that I really want to teach you guys, essentially, when you're going to be making your own projects. When you're going to be sharing the game to me, I'm hoping that you do something like this, showing organizational skills here. Like you can see, scripts, all the scripts. So the next time I make a script, I'm going to right click and create a script over here specifically in this folder. All right, and then if I go to scenes, you can see that, well, all the scenes are there. If I go to prefabs, all the prefabs are here. Like so far, I only have 3 prefabs, but that doesn't really matter. Okay, we're gonna keep on adding more prefabs soon. Then all the materials and textures are here. I don't know why I have a lot, but if you want to organize all of your materials and textures, it's always recommended to put it in one single place. All right. Just for the sake, I know a lot of you are OCD. I put the script over here, but the thing was there was some error popping up when I dragged the script through this folder. So I just want to keep it here for now so that I don't make this meeting an entire flop, okay? Because I want this meeting to move on. So apologies on that. All right, and then let's see what else I did. Yeah, I also made a new prefab, as you probably have seen, a blocker. Okay, I wanted to explain a bit about what blockers are. So if I play this game right now, right? If I play this game, I'll let it run for a moment. It's taking a bit of time. All right, there you go. If I play this game, right, and I move back, it's not letting me go, right? It's not. I'm still pushing on my keyboard back. It's not letting me go. And yeah, that's the point, right? That's what blockers are. If I did not have that blocker, right? So let's just why did I even should have just played the game? Wanted to show you an example. Yeah, so if I move the block, as I said, it doesn't move, right? But if I let's say I think this is called a blocker. If I set active this to false, so let's say it just didn't exist. This is the hypothetical scenario. If I didn't do that, it'll just fall through. And the thing is, I have rigid body, right? So if I applied rigid body to my character, it has physics. That means it has gravity. So now it's just gonna fall down forever, and you can't play the game. And this is something that you might have also encountered in your own game as well, wondering that, okay, how in the world can I, make this character block away from moving that way, right? I know that some of you guys want to keep it invisible. A lot of people love keeping those blockers invisible in video games. Now, the good thing is it's a prefab. Now, how would I apply something to whole? Now, we know that in prefab, if I just double click on this single prefab, I can just manipulate with these single things. And now if I click on mesh render, what mesh render does is just rendering the outside of that object, okay? It's just rendering it to be existent in the thing. Now, even if I turn this off, it's not going to exist, right? So let me just click that again. It's not going to exist. However, if I go back and I click on play, really apologize for the delay. All right. Now, if I still go back, it's not letting me go, right? And the thing is, mesh render is different than the idea of set active. What set active means, this is the basically set active. If I turn this off, then it just doesn't exist. When it doesn't exist, then it just doesn't exist. It's just like saying like that does not exist in this environment. However, if I go to blocker, right, if I just go through this and I see those cubes here, and I turn off the mesh render, that means it's still there. It's just that you can't see it. So that means its box collider, all the components it has, is still active. That means it's still in the environment, however, you just can't see it because you're telling the computer to not render that specific object in the scene. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. There's a difference between this button and this button. So a lot of you guys, this is like a trick for you all. If you want to keep your blockers invisible on the wall, then click on your prefab, whatever blocker you made, and turn off the mesh render. But for me, I kind of like them on. So I'm just gonna keep it that way. So let me just save this app. All right. So this is what I wanted to talk about. This is a bit about blockers in your games, and a lot of you in the future might be making games where there's an end, but you don't want to tell the user to go beyond that place. And that's the idea. That's the kind of place where you could apply this type of idea in your game. All right. Another thing I wanted to talk about is rigid body and a box collider. As I said in the previous lecture, I kind of maybe briefly went over box colliders, but in this lecture, we're also not going to touch a lot on this stuff. That's probably in the next few lectures when we're going to start making our level system and stuff, right? So what box collider does is just allowing to know the collision between two objects. But as I said, one object must have a rigid body. So one object should notice physics so that the other can rely on it. So that's why you don't need to have two objects that needs a rigid body, only one. And for us, the character has a rigid body. So if I applied, let's say on the obstacles, right? So every obstacle, as I know, has a box collider. So if I applied a box collider, this means that if I play this game again, right? If I play this game again. So if the character has a rigid body and the obstacle itself has a box collider, in theory, and it's not really in theory, it's just true, it's not going to go through because the character is noticing that there is something around it, and using box collider, it can create this collision kind of thing, that repelling like idea of repelling against each other. So it's not going to go against each other. And this is something that you must know. And it's very important to have in your game because, well, it's just going to ruin the player experience. And second, we are going to soon do something where if the player, touches these type of stuff, it's going to make the player reset from the beginning. Okay, so we're gonna make our game design some sort of way, something like that, and you just want to make sure that you do make sure that your game has something like this, where the character, if that character touches the stuff on the side of your wall or anything like this, make sure it's repelling against each other. Make sure it's actually following the ideas of physics, and the way you do that is by applying the rigid body on this character, right? And then you also apply box colliders, which are automatically applied to them. All right. That's basically it from me in terms of all of these different things. But one additional thing I wanted to go over was some stuff I made. I made some modifications in my own code. Okay, so I don't know why my Visual Studio is not responding. Maybe I might need to close Visual Studio. Let's open this again. This meeting might extend a bit to an hour, but if you feel like you cannot handle living an hour of your life, that's okay. You can leave, but make sure you do leave by 3:45 so that you get the credit, all right? All right, so what I wanted to do is I added a few more things, like an idea like exiting the game. So this is something that I really want a lot of you guys to have. Not even a lot of you. Basically, you should just have this in your own game, okay? Whenever you start a game or make any game, make sure in the update method, because it constantly updates in the game, right? Because if you put this thing in the start method, it's just gonna happen once, not always. I get the idea of what you're trying to say, but that well, we're only going to play the game once, right? We're not going to keep on playing again. But the thing is, if we keep on, and it's only going to, the start method is only going to happen once after the scene has been loaded, right? But it's always good to keep it in an update because you could be dying in the game, anything could be happening, or you press the escape key once and it didn't work again. So it's always better to put an update. It's constantly updating the scene, and you can click on the exit button. So what I'm trying to say here is if I click on the escape key, so if input.getKey, which just basically calls that type of input key on your keyboard, and the key chord is escape. So this is the command statement of the escape key. This is the thing that's representing the escape key. Then if I do press this is the idea. If I press this button, then application.quit. This statement basically says to just quit the application, all right? And this is something that I want you guys to definitely have. Because I do not want to go click on escape or the Windows tab and then manually exit it. You should just make the play experience really good in the beginning so that if I just press escape key, I just get out of the game immediately. I shouldn't have any problems leaving the game. All right. And let's see. We're going to go a bit on input.getAxis. As I mentioned today, we're going to talk a bit about GetAxis, but don't worry, I'll mention that in the agenda. Let's see. Yes, and I also applied the idea of refactoring. So in your code, you probably put input.getKey or something, and you translate the thing, right? But you could actually just make a method called movePlayer, and inside of that movePlayer, you could just paste the code. And what this does is it allows you to simplify your code itself. But you might be asking me, well, aren't you just extending the lines? Yes, but really, it's trying to make your eyes easier. So if you see the update method, you're going to see, okay, so this method's running. What does this method do? Oh, okay, so if I go to this method, which is basically the place where you kind of make the method happen. This is the place where you kind of modify the method. Then according to this method, I'll be making some variables, and then I'll be pressing some keys. If I press that, then something will happen, else then something else will happen. Okay, so this is something going on with translating. It's translating the z value and x value. Well, you might be asking, as I said previously, why is the y side 0? Well, because we're not dealing with the y variable. Unless you're doing something about jumping, then yes, that would be another case. But jumping is a bit difficult, especially in Unity. That's why I kind of pulled it off in this project, so you guys don't need to worry about it. This is why I keep it 0, because we're not affecting the y variable. So anything plus 0 is just itself. So that means y value will just retain where it is. And then we also made some, move speed. Move speed is this. We also talked about serialized field. Serialized field is just basically that if I make anything that's a variable and it's serialized, then if I go back to Unity and this component which is applied to any game object, the script, you can see that move speed inside of that component and you can modify it from there. So it's really good for playtesting, right? So if you keep on playing the game, you can modify the numbers. So if let's just say again, if I play the game, yeah, if I play the game here, and what happens is I can actually just change the speed here manually, and the value changes, which is pretty good, you know. I can also still change it lower, higher, whatever you want. You can see now it's going much lower. But that's the idea. But if I press the stop button, this is something you guys need to know. It's gonna reset to what it was previously. Okay, and that's pretty good in a way. It's also kind of bad because it also loses all your data that you were trying to work. So this is something you need to keep in mind, that if you're gonna play test, make sure you do remember the values, or you keep it into note in some place, and then you could apply the variables, the values, right after you stop the game manually in these inputs. Okay, so this is something about serialized view. It's really helpful. It's a really good tool, and this is something that you should keep on using, but not maybe too much, because then it's going to start, cause maybe some bugs in your game, whatever. But too much of anything obviously is bad, so just keep it in limits. I know you guys can. I also talked about serialized field, so I basically made another variable, which is like a boost. So if I press the shift key, it's gonna multiply that value by this boost value, which I initially set it to 2. Now you might be asking me, if I go back to Unity and I change this value to 10, right? Does that mean this is affected? No, not at all. That's actually a good part, because if I change the value here, it doesn't really care about the code, whatever I set this value to. It's just only going to care about what I set in this component. All right, so you don't need to worry about it. Whatever is set over here is just set in the code. So don't worry about what you set in that program. The only thing you might need to worry about is when you're going to share your code, or you're going to share your program file to other people, and you're going to zip it. Then you might need to notify them, or you might need to go to the code manually and change the value so that they wouldn't encounter any problems. Okay. For us though, my move speed is still 15, so I'm just gonna save it. All right, so just keep that in mind. I would always recommend making serialized field values rather than making like a public float or private float, because if you make those type of variables, then they're just set. They're fixed values, and you cannot change them manually in the components in the Unity editor. All right, so serialized field is a really good tool. That's what I'm trying to say. We're gonna get over this right now pretty soon. Once we talk about today's topics, we will get over it and understand what these things are. Okay. I know you guys were talking about, if input.getKey A, input.getKey B, input.getKey S. There's like a lot of problems with those stuff. I'll explain why. Again, it's a very tense situation. I'm raising some concerns now, so don't worry, chill out. I'll explain it in a short bit. All right. So let's get right into it. I think this is it's gonna be a really fun class today, because I'm gonna help you simplify your code and all that kind of stuff. All right. So let me just go back to intermission. Oh, the screen is barely visible. I'm really sorry. I'll do something about it. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So all right. Today, what we're gonna talk about? Let's talk about today's agenda now. First, we're gonna talk about input manager and GetAxis. So we're gonna learn a better way of accessing the input key values that you will use to input in the game, so that you could connect and interact with the game. Right? You can move forward, backwards, jump. There's gonna be a better method which we call GetAxis, which is from input manager. All these words might sound very confusing to me, or to you. Let's not say to me, because that'd be bad, but to all the people that's in the class right now. But don't worry, I'm gonna clear it all out, clarify it. And if you do still have any questions, just bring it up in the Unity chat or programming chat. And again, this video is still on YouTube, so you could still ask in the YouTube comments, and the GDC team or me I will also do my best to answer them. All right. Okay, and then second thing we're going to talk about is Time.deltaTime. Right, we're going to talk about frame rate and all that kind of stuff in Time.deltaTime, all that kind of concerns that raise in the gaming industry, especially when many different people are playing games on different specs, on different computers, on different quality of computers. Right, some people play on really crappy computers, some people play on really good and very awesome computers. RTX 3090, which is obviously very hard to get, but if you do have, but you're going to have a really great experience, but not for everyone, right? So Time.deltaTime is going to cover that problem. It's going to bring up that kind of solution, to that kind of problem, and it's going to help us. And then finally, we're going to finalize our game. Okay, finally, the goal of today's meeting is to be able to move the camera with the character. As we see, as you seen before, the character that we've been making, it's only moving, and the camera isn't moving, and it's kind of ruining the player experience. In a third-person video game, we would usually have the camera follow the character, and Cinemachine is a tool by Unity that will help us solve that problem, and it's going to be an amazing tool. And I'm really excited to teach you all because this is going to be such a fun video once we do it. All right, so let's begin. Let me just open my presentation. And let's begin. Just give me a moment. Okay, let me just grab, oops. All right, so let's start off with Input Manager and GetAxis. How do you get rid of the thing below? I'm trying to fix that. Okay, it's fine, I guess. So Input Manager, if you see in Unity, we've seen that there's like a lot of problems when we start, doing coding with Unity and all that kind of stuff. If you go back to our code, right, what you guys were doing is if you press A, if you press B, WASD keys, you'll realize that all these things is just compatible with computers. We never wondered by now that these coding thing that we've been doing, is it applicable to let's say on consoles like PlayStation or Xbox? Is it applicable to mobile games? No, right? Because they don't have WASD keys unless a mobile phone has a keyboard, which I'm pretty sure in the new generation phones we just don't. We don't have a keyboard, rather a virtual keyboard on our phone, which isn't really considered a keyboard. So what I'm trying to say here is what we've done so far in the previous meeting, it has only been applicable, this type of game input, to only Mac and Windows, and also Linux, obviously. But basically anything to a computer, not to a console, and not to all that kind of stuff, not to consoles. And it causes problems because if you're trying to export your game to PlayStation 4 or to Xbox, which I'm pretty sure you can, if you export your game as a PlayStation 4 file, you can, I think, submit a request to PlayStation and stuff, and you can do it. You can play your game on PlayStation 4. But that's not always the case, right? But I'm just saying, imagine those scenarios. If you want to play your games on those consoles, using that game input keys that I've taught you, that if input.get key, keycode.a, keycode.a, WSD, all the key things that I taught you, it doesn't work on everything. Second problem is that, there are two types of movement keys for computers. There's WASD, and not a lot of you know, but there's also up arrow, down arrow, left arrow, right arrow. But we don't want to like you might also say that in your code you can say, okay, if input.get code keycode.a or the up arrow, which is also the case. If either I press the up arrow or the W, then it will move forward. Sure, you can do that, but that causes more complexity in your program. Like what you see right now over here, input.getAxis, horizontal, time.deltaTime, move speed, and boost. They're all basically, well, what do you say? It's very simple. It's literally just one line. So is yours, but it's very long compared to what I just did here, right? It's very long compared to what you did. So what I'm trying to say is we should always make sure that we're trying to simplify our program rather than making it more complex. I know that type of idea that coders should be super cool, they should be typing a lot, but to be honest, if you're a really good coder, that really means you're saving time and you're making you're coding a file, you're compiling a file really, really easy to read. That's what makes an amazing coder basically an amazing coder. And this is what I want to teach you as well. Don't make your code complex. Rather, make it very easy to read and very easy to run at the same time. And this is what I want to teach you today. Input Manager. All right, so if I go to, I think it's Edit Preferences. So if I go to Edit over here, I click on, I think it's Preferences. Yes, if I go to Edit and Preferences, there's an option here. And if I see it, I don't know why I don't see it. Huh. Is Unity just bullying me today? This is very sus. Basically, I think I clicked on the wrong one. Okay, it's Edit and Project Settings. So if I go to Edit and Project Settings, you might go somewhere here, but I want you to go to Input Manager. Okay, and you're gonna see a lot of stuff right now. So let me just, make it full screen for you. There's a lot of things. Okay, we're gonna discuss about these things: axes, what horizontal, vertical, fire one. There's so many different categories. But what these things are is that Unity has already simplified the code for you with just one string reference. What I mean by string reference is if you just type in string and put this word in, which is very case sensitive, so you have to be careful that you type it exactly the way it is. Um, then what happens is you're going to be able to access all the things that's within the horizontal component. So that could be like what? Left and right key. So the positive button is, I believe, right, and the negative button is left. And we know that, right? Left arrow is the negative side of the axis, and right side is the positive side of the axis. So think of it in a Cartesian coordinate system. If you don't know about this, I'll send a link in the resources channel. Basically, Cartesian coordinate system is just a complex way of saying the XY coordinate system, okay? It's just XY plane. And when we talk about x-axis, anything that's left side of the x-axis is negative. Anything that's right side of the axis is positive. That's the same thing here. Negative button is left, positive button is right. So if I move left, that's negative. If I move right, that's positive. And this is what horizontal component, or let's not say component, the horizontal axes, which is what we call them, it's storing all these different information. So the negative button for keyboard is A, then D, and then they also have the left arrow key, which is this, and the right arrow key. They have done all these things for us, which is pretty cool if you think of it. All right. Same thing for vertical. You can see this here. They did for the down button, up button, same thing, because anything that's down in the y-axis is negative. Anything that's above in the y-axis is positive. And same thing for S and W. S is down, right? WASD. Well, you press S to move backwards and W to move forwards. It depends on what type of game you're making. If you're making a rocket game, then W might mean going up, and S might be going down. It's just the same idea here. What I'm trying to say that these different axes are storing values, these type of information, and you can access that in your code rather than saying, hey, input.getKey keycode.a, right? It just saves a lot of time with wording and stuff. And also with your brain, you're going to have to memorize less, which is kind of a benefit. Let's just go back. So as I said, we've seen this. And what happens, and I said it's found in project settings, edit in project settings. Again, this is accessible in the Unity Discord resources channel. So if you feel like, hey, I got stuff, I don't know where this is, you can always go to the slideshow here and find it out. So basically, Input Manager is like the controller for all inputs. We could call it a framework, like a foundation where all the inputs have been made by Unity, just by default. Right, so we can say that input manager. So let me just press the L key. Yeah, that's better. So what this does, they have these dedicated words, right? Like horizontal, vertical, and they store specific input types, like clicking, running, walking, etc., etc. As I said, and then it also helps simplify the code and logic. It just kind of saves your time, and it also saves you from a really severe headache, because reading a complex code can also cause severe headache, and it's also kind of a mental exercise that you should try to not stress a lot, because you have a lot to do in a long period of time, and you don't want to destroy your brain just on something that's very small. And this is the type of mindset that you need to keep when you're trying to be a coder. It's also just one word away, which is also a benefit, right? To memorize all the different type of key codes, well, it takes a lot of time. Okay, some things require string reference, like the up, down, left, right arrow keys. If you were going to use that get key method, but other ones doesn't need it. You just do key code dot a, and you don't know if it's capital A or lowercase a, right? So it requires a lot of knowledge, requires a lot of practicing, requires a lot of memorization, which is something you should just never do. Don't memorize just for the sake of memorizing, right? And memorizing comes from nature. It comes from just practicing eventually a lot, and you're just gonna get that in your head. And that's a type of thing that you should also try doing. Just basically learn a lot, start working a lot, and you will naturally get these things inside of your head. And that's how you should be memorizing it. Okay, it's like a remote button, right? It's just one touch away. Like in this scenario, it's like an analogy. One touch away from turning on the TV. So it's the same idea here. That is just one word away from getting all these these inputs. Okay, I think oops. Oh, we don't have access to this. Yeah, okay, I'll check that. My bad. Right, so what I'm trying to say here is there's this thing called input.getKey, as I said, GetAxis. So GetAxis by default, right? Many developers use that more compared to input.getKey. Input.getKey is more like a newbie kind of thing. But once you get more into game development, once you try to make your game more polished and stuff, you should start using GetAxis compared to input.getKey. It's a more universal thing, so GetAxis has more universal standards. And they have more access, right? So GetAxis allows you to use it for consoles, use it in your computer, and for computer, it's not only just the WASD keys; it also stores the up, down, left, right arrow keys. So just calling in the horizontal GetAxis in your code, that doesn't just include the WASD; it also includes the up, down, left, right, which saves a lot of lines, right? Just with one word, it saves a lot of lines, which is very good for you guys. Okay. So in my mindset, I always think that the less lines, the better. Okay. Now that's again relative. Okay, because less line, if you're gonna give me a very crappy program, that's bad. But if you try to give a very good program with less lines, but it's very concise and very clear and very good at the same time, then yes, that is a very good program. This is something that I want to tell you as well. Right. Yes. So for in this GDC for this section, we'll be only focusing on horizontal and vertical axes. So as I said, if you go back to Unity, there's so many components. Okay, let's not say components again. I don't know why am I saying components. There are many different type of axes. There's like fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. Fire 1, fire 2 is like the left click, right click buttons when you're trying to shoot. Right. There's jump. There's mouse X, mouse Y, mouse green. Well, there's a lot of stuff. But we'll be using probably the jump maybe like in in a section of this Unity project. So the only thing I want you guys to focus on is the horizontal and vertical component. All right. And basically, what I wanted to explain before we move on to the next idea is about axes. Axes are basically, it's an idea where you're just moving from one side to another. All right. So let me just move my camera a bit over here because it's going to help you see some stuff, right? My apologies. Yeah, so if you see back over here, axes, it's just moving from one side to another, right? So left to right, as I said, or up to down. That's an axis. Like you can see in the coordinate system, we have lines up and down, up and down, and left and right. It's the same thing here. It's basically that. But what happens is when you use input.getKey, it never measures how much you're going to that place. All right, it never talks about sensitivity and stuff. And this is where GetAxis does a really good job. GetAxis can notice these things. It can notice how much pressure you're applying to it, right? What's the state of it? It ranges from 0 to 1, right? 0 means you're just not applying anything at all. Like it's not going to the right at all. 0.5, yep, you're going. And 1 is you're totally going. You fully pressed it. You fully press that button, and you're going to the right. So I wanted to demonstrate an example about this with a controller. Okay. I don't have a PS4 controller. I mean, I have it, but I think I lost it or something. I don't know. But I'm gonna use an Oculus Quest controller. It's the same thing. But what I wanted to talk about is joysticks. Okay, so you can see that over here. See that this is a joystick in Unity. It's the same idea. All right, I'm just scared that if I sound loud, but I really apologize if that's the case. But what I want to talk about is that joysticks doesn't have like this, 0 and 1 state. 0 is like, yeah, completely not, and 1, yes, it's true. It's not true or false state. It could be true in many different scenarios, right? It could be 0, like it can. If I zoom in very close here, this is 0, but I applied a little bit of sensitivity pressure. That doesn't mean it's 1, right? It means it's 0 point something, and this is where GetAxis does stuff. It helps smoothen out the movement in your video game. So if you're pressing something and you're trying to ease out that kind of movement, then this is a really great tool. It does a lot of job for you. So we can see over here. Let me just go back here. You can see that, hey, it's 0, then 0 0.5, 0 0.2, 0 0.3, 0 0.5, and I press it fully. That is 1. I fully pressed it. This is the idea of what I mean by going up. So you're going up with the state of fully going up, right? So let me actually demonstrate this for you because I think I made a code about this. Let me just go back. Also move my camera to a bit to the right there. Okay, that's good. So I think if I go to the console and oops, this is not good. What just happened? Wait, what? I'm sorry. What's going on? Oh, okay. I did something. I don't know what I did, but okay. Let's just run the program. Just give me a moment. All right, so you can see this over here. That I'm moving now. You can see over here the 0 and 1. 0 means I have not applied anything. Now, if I press the up arrow key, which I have applied the state, if I press the up arrow key, then I call the vertical component, right? So I press it. You can see that the value is changing, right? Or maybe it's the down arrow key. I'm not sure. Okay, now you can see that again. You can see that the thing has changed. You can see that again. It has changed from 21 to 41, as you can see over here on the right side. So you can see that it's in a state of 0, 1, and 0. And if you're trying to call that in the debug log, it only shows that 0 is 1. But I wanted to demonstrate using this tool because joystick is the best example. When you're trying to move your game with the controller, usually GetAxis is really important because it helps recognize that percentage, that 0.1, then 0.2, how much pressure you applied to that joystick. And that's where sorry, not game, GetAxis becomes a really important tool when you're trying to do those stuff. All right, so I'm just gonna stop the program. I'm gonna clear these things. Let's go back to the code, and I wanted to explain about what I did over here before we move on. I basically made both x and y values, right? I initialized it here. Now, what happens is if I initialize it inside of this, it could possibly cause problems because I'm accessing this variable 2 times. So I shouldn't be making the same variable 2 times. I should just initialize it outside and give it some value, okay? Initially, I would set this value to 0 because I'm just putting nothing in it, right? You need to give it some value. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to initialize that variable. Every time you make a variable, you need to give it some value, all right? Anything. Could be any value because you're just going to change it anyway over here. You could change this value to, like 7 and it still doesn't matter, but I'm going to still keep it to 0. What I did here is since I wanted to boost, right? So let's just actually ignore this code because technically you don't need the if else statement. I just did it as an additional thing, but you only need to put this inside of your update method. And I made that x value equal to the input.getAxis. So it's the same thing as input.getKey, but instead of getKey, we're going to type getAxis. Then in the parentheses, we're going to do the string reference. String reference meaning we're calling that axis in terms of string. Now this is case sensitive. If I like let's say if no. If I made it lowercase h, it's gonna cause problem. Like if I'm gonna save this and go back to Unity, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna bring up a lot of errors, and that's not gonna be a good thing, right? Takes a bit of time to load Unity. It's not gonna show up, but what happens is you really cannot access it, and maybe in the new updates, maybe they worked on that, but always make sure it's case sensitive. You need to make sure it's case sensitive. It's capital H, it's capital V. Even if I run the program, I'm not going to be able to use the left and right keys at all. So make sure you do make these things, input.getAxis. Then I multiply it by time.deltaTime, which is going to be our next topic right after this. And then I multiplied by the move speed, right? I multiplied this horizontal component by the move speed, which was 15f, right? F because, well, if you want to initialize anything that's a float number, you need to always put an f in the end. Always make sure you do that, okay? And just to give you for the sake of reference, the way I made a boost, so when I say boost, if I press the shift button, I'm going to move a bit faster because usually shift button, left shift key button is usually the way to, bring some sort of boosting in the game or something. Usually like nitro or something that makes the character faster. Usually it's used for running as well, so in a way we could call it running. Basically, I said that if the get key, if I press the left shift button key, this is how you call it. Then basically they're the same code. It's just that instead of just putting this, I'm gonna also multiply it by the boost variable. So it's gonna additionally also multiply it by some value, which is the boost. And for us, we set that to 2f. But again, that doesn't depend on this value necessarily. It also depends on whatever importing character.movecs. Okay, hold on. Okay, if I go back to character, Oh boy. If I go back to character, it's gonna only rely on the value here because I serialized it, right? So whatever I change the value there, it's gonna change it to that and apply it to this boost value over here. That's how I did for the boost. And if basically if I just don't ever press this, then I'm just gonna evaluate this statement over here, which is just basically what I did here is just that I didn't multiply it by the boost value. So it's just gonna move normally as it's supposed to be moving. Okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about. That GetAxis is just like an easier way of getting your inputs and stuff, which is pretty good. Yeah, we don't need to modify anything for now, like as I said. So you might be wondering as well, like if I go back here, go to the project settings, you might be wondering that, hey, has Unity already done these things for us? Let me just. Okay, I made this kind of too big, didn't I? Right. So you might be wondering that has Unity already done these things for us? Have they already initialized all these things for us at the first place? Yeah, they did this. They did all of these things by default, so you don't actually have to worry about this. I was just showing you this input manager, so to just give you like a good idea, a good grasp of what I was trying to talk to you about, and you'll just get it right after that. You don't actually ever have to come back to these input manager unless you want to change something specifically in this stuff like sensitivity or the sensitivity here for the vertical component, vertical axes or horizontal axes. But again, I don't think you should ever modify these things. They're already good as it is, and just change what you did in the code, and you'll be good to go. All right. All right. Now let's talk about time.delta-time. Time.delta-time is this next topic we wanted to talk about, and let's kind of give you like an idea. Okay, if I play this game, right? It's gonna be a very good topic to discuss about because I might be flexing now, because if you click on the top right, you can see that, okay, now my FPS has lowered down because I have a lot of things open, like OBS and stuff, so it's taking up my CPU, my GPU basically as well. But you can see that my FPS is 229. It's changing every time. It's constantly changing, right? If you played your game in your own computer, it could be at 1000 FPS, it could be at 4000 FPS, it could also be at 30 FPS, it could also be at 40 FPS. Depending on your computer specs, this FPS rate will be different for you. Now, what is FPS? A lot of you guys probably know what FPS is by now, but just to give a brief insight, FPS is frames per second. Now think of it, frames per second. It's just that for every second you have, a certain amount of frame is given inside of the screen. A certain amount of frames is rendered per second, right? Now the thing is, we all have different computer specs, and thing is, like, let's say on this bad computer there was 15 FPS, and on this good computer there was like 1000 FPS, right? And let's say on this one computer it runs super fast, on that other computer, that 15 FPS computer, the game runs super slow because of that frame rate, because it's not rendering a good amount of frame rate to the screen per second. So it's not making the gameplay smooth, right? And we know that update method, like if you go back to the code, the update method, and we put this move player in the update method, right? Because we always need to access this key. We're not going to be using this key once. We're going to consistently use the key until the scene ends. And the thing is, yeah, so like what I'm trying to say, that this update method is depending on the computer speed, right? That means what happens is when I keep on running the game at 225 FPS, that also means the update method, in terms of, in theory, is also running in 225, whatever frame rate this is over here. The thing is, if we do that, that means the update method will run slower on other computers, and the update method will run faster on other computers, and that kind of brings an unfair advantage as well, right? And it's gonna be bad. It's just gonna make your your game look really bad in some computers and game look good on some computers. So the idea here is we want to make the frame rate independent of everything. We want to make the frame rate independent of the update method and basically everything in your game, so that you wouldn't ever cause and bring up this problem. You want this character to be moving normally as it is in every single computer. It shouldn't be moving faster in some computers. It should be moving slower in some computers, because depending on what computer specs you have, it could be running fast or it could be running slow. So you want to make frame rate independent. So how do we do that? Well, we use time.delta-time, okay? Now, we use that to tell us how much each frame took to execute, right? Time.delta-time is just telling you how much frames took essentially to execute your program. And then we also multiply that thing. Anything we move, right? Anything movement in the game, you always need to know that you're multiplying that. You make sure you do this. You multiply this by time.delta_time. So that essentially makes your game frame rate independent. And this is the biggest thing in your video game. Always, always, always. Your game must be frame rate independent. And this is something that Unity does a great job on, especially their game engine. They have this time.delta_time, and that's what essentially making their game look amazingly good. Maybe not their game, but their engine. That's making their engine become a really, really versatile engine that makes people's games essentially look good on any computer, essentially, right? As I said, it behaves same on fast. We want to make sure that the game is behaving the same on fast and slow computers. We don't want to say that, okay, this guy has 1000 FPS, that means the game will be running much better. Time.delta_time will bring a fair advantage to everyone. Okay, and that's what we want, fairness in video gaming. So we need to give like an example. Okay, so we have this computer here which runs 10 frames per second. And then we have our computer here that runs 100 frames per second. So this is a slow and a fast computer. Now the duration of that frame is 0.1 second. Now how do we know it's 0.1 second? Well, if you add 0.1 second 10 times, right? That means you're going to get 10. So it's 0.1 second per each frame. That's kind of an example. That for each frame, it takes 0.1 second to run it. And we know that because if you're going to add 0.1 10 times, right? So 0.1 times 10, you're going to get 10. My math is wrong there. But if you're going to keep on adding it 10 times, you're going to get 10 frames per second. Same thing over here. If you're going to add it 100 times, you're going to get 100 frames per second. And you want to make sure that on the update method, each frame is actually moving standardized in a standardized unit. It's moving 1 unit to the left, regardless of your frame rate, right? Basically, that's what you're trying to say. And as I said over here, 1 times 10 times 0.1 equals 1. We also want to know that, and the way we do this, what time.delta_time in theory is doing, let me just move my camera up here. What is in theory doing is that it's multiplying how much frame it takes for each, how much time it takes for each frame to run. You're multiplying that by the frames per second you have, right? And you multiply that by 1 essentially, and you get this value, well, 1, right? Because if you do 10 times 0.1, that essentially just gives you 1, if you know that. And over here, it's 100 times 0.01, that also gives you 1. So 1 times 1 essentially gives you 1. So what happens is that you, after doing this calculation, in theory, you have made your game frame rate independent, and that's true. If you see many different games, it just becomes frame rate independent. And you could do this test cases by running your computer, or not your computer, by running your game on different computers, maybe one on a really bad one and one on a really good one, and try it out. Try one without time.delta_time and try one with time.delta_time. And you'll see that amazing thing about game development, that they have this cool technique of time.delta_time, and it helps make your game frame rate independent. Okay, so for us, we know that we use the move speed variable, and we're multiplying by that. And we also want to make sure that, you know, the GetAxis horizontal thing, whenever we utilize it, we are also multiplying that by the move speed, right? Because that's also affecting how much we're moving ahead and behind. That's really the thing. If we modify the move speed, it should be modifying our movement level, right? How fast we're moving, how slow we're moving. That's essentially determined by this variable move speed. So we need to multiply that, again, as I mentioned in our code, we multiplied that over here by our horizontal GetAxis, right? So the value of move speed does not really need to update each frame, right? Because time.delta_time, because you multiplied it, really. Okay, and then we did it both for the x and z value. X is for left and right, z values for front and back. But depending on your position, x could also be front and back, and c could be left and right. So make sure your positions are correct, and it's being affected by move speed because you're multiplying by it. And then usually you can use what's it called? Game testing. You could play test your games consistently by playing it in the Unity editor and modifying in the Unity inspector panel over here while playing it, as I said, all the time. Just keep on doing that. And once you got the right amount, record that, stop playing it, and modify it manually over here because, as I said, it resets to what it was originally. Keep on doing that. It retains what it was. Okay. So what we do in order to keep your frame rate independent, what you always need to do, there's not really a good way to explain this. It's just that multiplied by time.delta_time. You multiply your movement by the time.delta-time, literally, just multiply by this little code that we have here to make your game frame rate independent. Do that for all of that, and then you're essentially making your game frame rate independent. Congrats, you know? Yeah, congrats, seriously. And your game is gonna go really great, hopefully, from there. Okay, and then multiplied by your move speed, because again, as I said, move speed is affecting your character. All right. Finally, this is the point where we're gonna be talking about Cinemachine. Okay, Cinemachine is that thing that's gonna help us move our camera along with the player, which is a really important thing when we're talking about in Unity, right? And again, we can also call this the TPP camera, so third-person camera. That's what many people say in video games. All right, so what is Cinemachine? Well, Cinemachine is just some sort of package that Unity has that lets us, well, one, manage multiple cameras in our scene, right? There's a lot of cameras probably in your scene. Cinemachine essentially just manages that. It's like the manager, the boss of that stuff. It just helps you like that, okay? Second, it helps create it just creates good rules for your camera. So you don't have to be worrying about this. It's something like Lawyer. Lawyer does all the stuff for your taxes and stuff, right? Maybe, I don't know. But it's like Cinemachine. Cinemachine is just handling all these camera stuff, all these complexities in cameras, and just doing that job for you, which is pretty good. You don't have to be worrying about these things because it's their job. So like let's say in this scenario, we have a camera, right, in our scene. Cinemachine has this component called Cinemachine Brain. So it's going to be controlling that camera you have in your scene. And what happens is that it is controlled by so many virtual cameras that Cinemachine owns. And that Cinemachine camera is going to be following the Cinemachine Brain, in which that Cinemachine Brain is going to send that information to the main camera. So that essentially, in theory, that virtual camera that we essentially create, right, somewhere in that thing, I'll explain more about virtual camera, and you'll just understand it by visually seeing it. It's just gonna notice from the Cinemachine brain, which is getting data from him, that we need to follow the main camera. How do we know the main camera? Well, the Cinemachine brain stores that information. It has been, this component is gonna be inside of this main camera, so clearly, Cinemachine brain knows what main camera it is, what camera it is that you're trying to make that camera move towards the character, right? And that virtual virtual camera that you'll be making is going to be following the Cinemachine brain. So that's the idea over here, right? So let's see. All right, so I think we could just go back now because I'll be teaching you guys about Cinemachine. All right, step one. What you need to do is you need to go to Windows, Package Manager, and you want to go find Cinemachine, okay? I have already installed it. I had some trouble installing it. If you ever have trouble installing Cinemachine, don't worry. I've encountered this problem as well. What I did, the best way, is just close Unity. Also go to Task Manager as well, or if you're on Mac and it's Activity Monitor, just turn it off and reopen Unity, and then install Cinemachine again. And I think it's just gonna work that time. Okay. If you cannot see Cinemachine, like you might probably be somewhere else while doing Cinemachine. My Unity is lagging. I am. Okay, there you go. Nope, it's not. Okay. Cinemachine is really, really slow today, is it? Oh, okay. All right, good. So if you cannot find Cinemachine, then you can just search for it here. You might not find it because you have to click over here and click on Unity Registry. Make sure you do click on it. Do not click on My Assets. Don't click on In Project. Don't click on Built-in Packages. Click on Unity Registry and then search for Cinemachine. Then click Install. For me, I cannot see it because I've already installed it. I only see the Remove button, which I won't. But for you, you're going to see like an Install button over here. Just click Install. Give it a moment, and it's going to install it. Okay. After you've installed it, you'll see something over here on the top left. You get a Cinemachine tab, which is kind of interesting, right? So the first thing we want to do after we install the Cinemachine is you want to go to the main character, not main character, main camera inside of your Unity scene. And you know what? I actually should be moving this over here, all right? Because I'm going to be messing with the components, okay? At the add component, right? When you click on add component, search for Cinemachine brain. You can see that here. I'll just click enter. And what happens is you've created some sort of brain component, as I said, which will be storing the information of what main camera are you trying to use in order to follow the character, right? Which main camera are you trying to use that will follow the character in the game. All right. So after you've added the Cinemachine brain component, a virtual camera should show up here. For me, it's not. Okay, so that's okay. What we do is we just click on Cinemachine and click on virtual camera. Okay, we can see that up here, CMVM1. But just for the sake of the name, let's change it. So we just click on it once. I'm gonna call it VFC, Virtual Follow Camera. Maybe I'm gonna call it Virtual Follow Camera because maybe that's a better understanding for now. All right, I recommend dragging this thing a bit below to the main camera. Do not put it on the main camera, so don't make it gray, but make it blue. Just put it right below the camera so you can know that, okay, they're all organized on the top, so you can easily notice that, okay, these are all the camera component, all the camera objects. Okay, so it's just a way of easily, seeing stuff on the app. Okay, what we do is we do the next step after we put it up there is we click on the virtual follow camera, right? And what we do after that is, okay, basically what happens is if I create a virtual camera, right? I can see that over here, basically, essentially. We have a main camera, and we have a virtual camera. So if I follow that virtual camera, that also means the main camera is following along. So in a sense, virtual follow camera, that camera that we made, this virtual camera, it's kind of attached to the main camera. So if I move the main camera or the virtual camera, they'll be together. They'll be moving together. They're like stick together. All right. Yeah, that's just basically what I wanted to tell you. That, and you're gonna see this red thing over here. Don't worry, it just shows that that is now a Cinemachine camera. You've been using a virtual camera that's attached to this, and it's just a good way of recognizing that, okay, this camera is using this, and yeah. Now, what I want to do is, the thing is, this has not been adjusted to where I wanted it to be. So what I have to do now is I need to manually, and the thing is, I cannot click on main camera and move it. That's the bummer. I need to go to the virtual follow camera, and then manually change the camera. Okay, so I need to be working a lot with this. So just give me a moment. So just try using the position tool. So I think if I change this to 90, no, if I change to negative 90, that's a trick, guys. So if you ever feel like, hey, it's not the right place, just add a negative sign and it's just gonna flip it. All right, so that's just like a cool game dev kind of advice that I could give. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drag this to the side so that I can see the camera, how it looks like. All right, I'm just gonna. It's a good way of like seeing stuff. It's a good editing trick. Okay, so just adjust the way you want it to be. I'm just gonna maybe lower down or increase the X variable so that I can see the character down. Maybe gonna increase the height a bit, and there you go. Okay, I think that looks okay. No, that's not what I want to do. Yeah, I think that looks okay. And once you've adjusted everything you needed to do, what you do is you go back to this main virtual follow camera, right? What you do is you still go over here to the right where the components are for that kind of specific thing. And what you do is you basically change what's over here from body, which is a transposer, from transposer to framing transposer. Okay, and this will allow you to start following the camera um, to that object. Okay. Let's see what else is there. Sorry, I'm just looking at some notes that I did because it's all right. So yeah, okay. My bad. I don't know what I was doing. Basically, we have two things over here. We have follow and look at, right? So we have two different things. Basically, this is the part where we attach which particular game object we want to use that will follow the that the camera will be following, right? It needs to notice which object it's supposed to be following, right? We want it to follow this character, right? So the question is, do we put it in follow or do we put it in look at? Well, we put it in look at, okay, and we want to be applying the character character body. All right, it's a transform thing. Now I'm going to explain why, okay? So what follow does, if you put it in follow, it's more like a security camera. It's not going with the object, right? It's not like going to move along with it. If it's going to move, it's just going to be like a security camera. It's going to be moving, 180 degrees to the left and right. That's what follow is. It's just going to follow wherever it's going. Okay? It's a bit like that. So if it's more like you're in the audience and you're looking at where the object is going, but you're not following. This is why we put it in look at, because in look at, it's not only just looking at it where it is going, but it also detects the movement of it. So it goes within that particular distance that they are away from each other, and they move along. That's why we use look at, because when we're going to be playing the game, we're supposed to make the camera move along with the character, right? It's not like a security camera. That's why we use the look at. All right, so then what we can do is we could go down here, and we could, work with a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. But what I want to specifically work on, you don't need to worry about these things because usually it's not really a problem, because it's not really that much of a big deal. But something that I definitely want to work on is the camera distance, the distance between the object and the camera. So if I increase the camera distance, to 13.8 or something, it still doesn't do anything. I don't know why, but okay. Let's put it at 15 for now. But usually you'll see this thing over here. So let me just put this back in the game panel. You'll see this annoying, weird looking thing over here, like this weird this kind of, I don't know, picture that's kind of transparent. In order to remove that, just click away from the virtual follow camera and it'll go away. So let's just play it. Let's just see what's going on. Is it working? Is it not working? Let's figure out. Let it play the game first of all. Okay, now we can see that, hey, it's going. But I don't know why. Did I put it in look at? Let me just check. Oh, my bad. Okay, I don't know why. I think I was dumb. You were not supposed to put it. You were not supposed to put it in follow. As I said, if I put it in follow, then it's just going to follow the object. But I wanted, sorry, not follow. If I'm going to put it at the look at, it's just going to look at the object but not move along with it. That's what I was trying to say. You're supposed to put it at follow, not at look at. I'm really sorry about that. Okay, let's just save this. And play it. I guarantee it should be working now. Okay, let's just play this. Now we can see that, hey, we're playing and now the camera is moving along with the character, which is something that, well, we wanted to do. This is something that we definitely wanted to do. Now we see that again, that overlap with weird looking transparent thing. Just click away and you'll see that thing happening. I feel like the distance, I think, is a bit too much. So we can increase the distance over here. Right? Let's not make it that high. Maybe that's too much. Let's just decrease a bit more. Okay, that maybe looks a bit enough, right? Yeah, so I think that looks a bit enough to me, and I think it looks good. So let's just click away and play the game. And voila, we have done it. We have literally connected the virtual follow camera. This camera we did, it moves along with the object. Okay, now one thing, be sure to make sure what number I've put. So it's 29.73. So if I stop, the thing is, if I go to virtual follow camera, the camera distance will still be 15. So I think it was 29.73. Now you have to manually add that. That's what I was trying to say. You have to manually add it because Unity does not, save information when you're playtesting. All right, so that's basically it for today's session. Now, before we end the session, let me just put this thing here. All right, let's just go back to the intermission. Before we go back, make sure that you do look at the assignments. I've added some few stuff, and they're like it's not a lot. You just need to update what you did, and basically you need to apply that virtual follow camera to each of the levels that you made. Could be 2 levels or the 3 levels that you made. Some people made 4. I think 3 is enough. You don't really need to show it, but try to show some recording of that new mechanics that you made. using the virtual follow camera. As always, you could always go back to the YouTube channel, which I'll post very soon. And yeah, that's basically it. If you do have any questions, be sure to reach out in the Unity channel on Discord or the programming channel on Discord. I'll do my best to improve the quality of this video in the next lecture. I'm going to see what's wrong with all these things, what I've been doing. And hopefully the quality gets much better because I have Discord Nitro, so I should be doing something about that definitely. So again, thank you very much, guys. And I'll see you in the next lecture. Peace.